I am drawing for a living, and I'm married to this beautiful, amazing woman. We decide that we should have a baby. This whole pregnancy thing was exciting, and I was totally on board. So we got into the doctor's office, and they put the gel on the tummy, and they started putting the little instrument over there, and then it came through, very, very faintly, just. It was like everything just came into view. I realized there was a life in there. That's a big enough deal. But that's when I felt what it meant. And I couldn't imagine at that moment giving that up for any reason. So the fact that someone did for my own good, I mean, that's selflessness right there.
He said to me, "Do you mind if I look for my paternal parents?" And I said, no, go for it. You know, it's ease of mind, not only much so for you, and I think it's a great idea.
I'm 30 years old, and I can't believe I waited this long. I just had to put in an official request form. Meg comes in and wakes me up after getting a giant manila envelope in the mail. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, you're going to want to see this. Boy, it's one thing to know that you're adopted, but to read a piece of paper with your temporary name on it and to find out the names of your biological parents and what they looked like and what they did for a living, it's really surreal because it's like you're reading about someone else's life. So when I got the paper and I found out that my mother's name was Teresa Darling, and when I found out that my father's name was Richard Tremblay, it's very hard to process. So as soon as I found out their names, I started doing some detective work. Eventually tracked down my biological mother. So I dialed the number and the phone rang, and on the other end of the line I hear, hello? It was her husband. So I was ready for every eventuality, except for that one. My name's Matthew Goodmanson. I'd like to speak to Terry, please. She's not here right now. She's at work. Can I take a message? What do I do? My heart was going. So I left a message. Cut to the next day, and Meg comes in with the phone, and she says, yeah, it's Terry. I grabbed the phone. I said, hello, is this Terry? And she's like, yeah, is this Matthew? I'm like, yep. And I said, did you have a baby on April 27th, 1978? And she said, yes, I did. And I said, I am that baby. And she said, I've been waiting for this call for 30 years.
Carol was able to share with me a letter she had received maybe 6 months after she met my birth father. And I decided one day that I would type in my birth father's name into the search bar on Facebook. And lo and behold, there were 2 Jesus Riobos. As far as we knew, he didn't know anything about me. But I was going to take a chance and send a message to both of those people. Within maybe 4 or 5 days, not only did I receive a friend request, but I also received a message directly on my wall for all of Facebook world to see that said, I have a daughter in Canada that I don't know. Could you be her? So that was pretty surprising. It turned out that he did know about me. Carol had sent a letter to an address that she had.
I told him I had a child and gave her up for adoption. Yeah. So I sort of let him know that there was a baby out there. I think I said with his eyes and his smile.
The letter didn't get to him until 1979. So I was already 2.5 years old when he found out that I existed.
I never got anything back from him because I had moved by then. So when he did reply, there was no place to send the letters. So it was kind of a missed opportunity.
And he had no way of even beginning to know where to look or to know how to find me or talk to Carol. And so it's just kind of sad that, you know, this guy's knew about me for 35 years. I'm sure that must have been hard for him. My dear Amanda, I held my breath as I read your letter. You must be a person with great sensitivity and a very big heart. I want you to know that my family is your family and my land is yours. For all that have seen you, they agree that you look a lot like me and my family, and that makes me very happy. I had grown up with my mom and my sister looking quite similar, and my dad had 5 siblings that he looked like, and then there was just me floating out in the ether. When I found my birth father, Jesus, it was really interesting to see pictures of him because I am the spit from his mouth, so they say. He and I look very similar. Eventually, I plan to go to Spain, hopefully to meet Jesus, my father, and his boys. That is a goal of mine that I have been working towards since I found him in 2012.
At my grandfather's funeral, Brenda was there, and this was the first time I had seen her in about 25 years. So one of my family members had come up to me and said, "Richard, Brenda's pretty upset. She sees you here. She feels really uncomfortable and she's going to leave." At that moment, I had to let go of 28 years of hatred because I couldn't let this woman leave her father's funeral. I kind of sucked up 28 years of pride, and I went over to her and I said, "Hi, I guess you're Brenda. I believe you know who I am." And she said yes, and then we had the first conversation that we've ever had, and it just felt like a relief after that conversation was done. And then instead of seeing her as this person that's made so many mistakes, I was able to see her as a human being. My adopted father came up to me and he told me, he said, "Richard," he said, "Raymond," who was my grandfather, or because I was adopted, my uncle at that point, he said he always thought of me as a grandson, which I never knew. And he said the fact that I had forgiven his daughter would have meant a lot to him.
I said, "I know."
I was gonna say, water.
But do you really not see? I'll be waiting my whole life for me to arrive.
Because I'd always wondered who my real father was and if I was like him, I was able to use this dialogue with Brenda to actually try and find out who this man was. So I used what little information she had, and next thing you know, I'm looking up naval records, and I have actually, for the first time in my life, some real leads to go on. Essentially, it didn't really turn up much. I mean, naval records weren't the best or easiest to access from 1985 or 1984. Although I had a name and a rough idea of who this man was, I was still no closer to actually finding him. And eventually Adoption Services got back to me and they said, "So I'm sorry, Mr. Dunbar, but your birth certificate was blank. It's almost as if he never existed." So again, that was another dead end for me. When I was a child growing up, I had always wondered who this man was because I always had this ambition to want to change myself and to want to succeed, but everyone around me in my life, my adopted parents, my sister, everyone seemed to have this idealism that just stay who you are, it's good enough. In the military, we believe that leaders are made and not born. Eventually, you learn how to become a leader, and then those traits actually follow you into your civilian life. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you can hang up your uniform in your closet and then put on civilian clothes, but you still carry this separate code of ethics with you, and then that just helps you. When I joined the military in the beginning, the fact that my biological father was in the Navy, I kind of felt like I might have been following in this like mythical like person's footsteps. I knew that if I was ever going to meet my biological father, that for some reason in the back of my mind, I'd have to be at the same level or better than who he is so that he'd accept me.
When I found out I was pregnant, I was just turned 19 and still had a year of high school left because of my previous aversion to school.
I didn't want to see her pregnant as a teenager, but she was older. This was not a 12 or 14-year-old. I just didn't want to see it totally take over her life. I talked to her mostly about, do you really want to do this? She suddenly became a responsible adult.
Gotta make sure we're not lined up. I can see when people say that kids definitely change everything. It just gives you a whole different perspective on life. Like you just want to do so much better just for them. My son's name is Hayden. He kind of got me out of my bad spell. I went back to school after I had him and kind of got my career as a hairstylist going and has been going ever since. I'd broken up with his father once or twice in there and was a single mother, and it is tough, but it is possible to do, and when you have help, it's definitely possible.
It wasn't, I don't think, as much of a shock to me as it was when I was pregnant with her. But it was almost like she did it to prove that I didn't have to give her up and to say, it can be done. But I honestly don't think, that's really how she felt. That's how I felt.
When I saw Hayden for the first time, my mind kind of did flash back to thinking, oh, imagine if I had to give this baby up. That must have been a huge decision for her, and the fact that she actually made it and was able to do that says something about her. I definitely appreciate the sacrifice. It made me understand why they worked so hard to find me, even more so after I had my son. And I mean, I can understand because they stayed together, and so it's like you have this perfect puzzle. You've kept the puzzle, you kept it together, you stayed together, you maybe even added more pieces to the puzzle, but there's still the one piece there that's missing, and I think that's kind of sums it up for them.